Hey guys, it's Eric from DeHaven Camera, and today we're going to go over the setup and configuration of the Ronin RS3. And as an added benefit, we're going to do it with a heavier payload. So one of the questions we get asked all the time is, can we run a full-size Red or an Alexa Mini on the RS3? And the answer for the most part is yes. It depends on the lens that we're using and some of the accessories, but with it well configured and lightweight, we can get on the bigger cameras. So we're going to go over that today. And the process of setting it up and configuring is the same whether you're using an FX30 or an Alexa. So today we're going to be using a Red Dragon X, a DSCM2, a Zeiss CP2. We're going to use a bright tangerine atom matte box, a nucleus nano motor, and obviously our RS3. So the first thing that we want to do when we're getting ready to configure is to strip the camera down as small as we can. So we've removed the top plate, handle, base plates. We're going to flip the camera over and we're going to put on our dovetail. Now, one of the cool things about the new Ronin is that it does come with the extended dovetail or the longer dovetail, which didn't come with the original RS2. And that really allows you to get on larger cameras because we can move the camera front and back with a greater range. So we're going to turn this over and with 2 screws, and it's really important on a gimbal, we're always using 2 screws. One of the things that can happen is with a single screw, you can get rotation in the camera when you use a focus motor. It can push the camera around and then it won't engage. Also, because we're moving and we have a lot of movement happening, the camera can start to shift or slide, and that can be really dangerous. So 2 screws always. And what we're going to do with this one right now is we're going to move this because we know it's a heavier payload, so the camera is going to be further back on the gimbal. That means we need more of the dovetail showing on the front. So well, I'm going to set this up to about 3/4 off the front and about 1/4 off the rear. And that's a good starting point when we're running like a heavier payload. And we're going to check this first before we put any other accessories on. So we're going to come around to our gimbal, which we've already put on the tilt-a-ring. Another addition that I really recommend for heavier payloads just because it's easier to build off of. So we're going to slide this camera on and lock it. And I know we don't have anything on this yet, but what we're going to do is just check to make sure that we have enough distance at the back of the camera so that we don't interfere even with no accessories, because it's only going to get worse as we start to add accessories. So I'm going to find a quick bit of balance here just to make sure that even at its farthest extent, we have plenty of clearance, which we do. So now that that's on and the camera's already started to being built on here, we can leave the camera on. We can turn it around. We're going to add our lens. So we'll come over here, unlock, and we'll put our lens on. Now the next step is we're going to add our motor. So for this configuration, I really like these little small rig 1/4-20 rod mounts. So these can be mounted on the top of the Red. It becomes difficult in some of these configurations to build rods off the bottom with these smaller motors. So this gets me closer to the top of the camera, a little bit more compact. We're going to be using a 6-inch aluminum rod. So we're going to put that on here and lock that down. Get that nice and tight. Now, one cool thing about these nucleus nano motors is that because these CP2s have quite free spinning, we can use these smaller nucleus motors for lighter weight. Now you'll notice that I've set this up here, and I'm going to put the motor on actually on the top and in the center. And the reason that we do that on a lot of gimbal setups is the more we can keep the mass centralized, the closer to the center axis of the rear motor we are. As you have weight farther off from one side to the other, the more you have to move the camera, and the center of the lens becomes offset from the center axis, and then your stabilization begins to rock rather than pivot. And that's really important if you're trying to get a properly stabilized shot. So keeping our mass centralized means that we can keep the axis of the motor and the lens in alignment and gets for better shots. So by doing that, we're going to put the motor on the top and in the center, keep it nice and tight and compact. And then we're going to use one of these USB-C to USB micro cables. So we include these with our nano kits. It's an easy cable you can get on Amazon. I think the Ronin RS3 also comes with a micro to USB-C, but important cable if you're going to power this off the Ronin itself. So we'll go into the top USB-C port. So That's our first basic start of our setup. So now that we've got our lens, our motor on, we're going to check again quickly to make sure we still have enough space, that we're not exceeding the payload capacity. So I'm going to find a quick bit of balance here just to make sure that we're still well within our range without impacting. So we don't have to put any counterweights on yet. So we can see that we still have plenty of room here and we're fairly balanced. So we're going to move back and we're going to go to our matte box. Now, for this, I really like the Bright Tangerine Misfit Atom because we can take this rubber gasket off and reduce the weight considerably. So I'm going to put this on and we're going to use a 4x4 filter. So same thing again, we're talking about weight saving. So a 4x4 filter is 30% lighter than the 4x5.6 and should cover this lens completely. So I'm going to put that in the tray. And actually, I'm going to put this one on upside down. And the reason for that is it gives me more clearance here at the top so that I don't impact with the filter release. And that can help me when it comes to balancing. So now that we've got this on, I'm going to move these items out of the way. I'm going to spin the camera back around so it's looking at me, and I'm going to find a balance point again. So we're going to set up our front to rear balance. Get as close as we can. All right. So we can see right now that my front to rear balance is pretty close, but we need to check the tilt cage balance. So the next thing to be is once we get our front to rear, we're going to turn the camera upright, and this is why I put the matte box on upside down. And we're going to check our balance point here with our tilt cage. So right now we're a little top heavy. So by pointing it up like this, we're going to slide the tilt cage up, slide it down so that we find our balance point. Okay, that looks pretty good. So once we're balanced in our front to rear and our tilt cage, we should be able to put the camera in any position like this, and it should stay. So now, once we have that done, we can come around, we can start adding some more accessories and then go back to our balance. So one thing to keep in mind, if we have cables coming off of the camera onto, say, a monitor or a battery, we don't want to put those on first. So we want to balance everything that's within the tilt cage first and then add our cables to go to our monitors, because if we do that before, we're always going to be fighting that when we're balancing. So we're going to finish our balance and then we're going to add our cables. But what we do want to make sure is we have enough cable clearance. So what we're going to do is we're going to put on our cables that come off the camera, off the back of the camera, and make sure that they clear our gimbal. And if not, we may have to move the camera further forward and add some counterweight. So when looking at here, I put the power and the SDI cable on. We do interfere with the back of the gimbal. And that's a problem because obviously it's going to cause stability issues. So for this, we're going to slide the camera forward and we're going to add just a little bit of counterweight. So this is the Tilta counterweight system. This mounts to the bottom of the back of the dovetail. So we turn this around, we can see back here. This mounts right to the back of the bottom of the dovetail. We're going to put this all the way out towards the back and put one weight on the back of it. So that should cause us, or should allow us to move the camera forward just enough. Now ideally we want to have as little counterweight as possible. So adding counterweight is never a good thing because we're adding more weight to the rig, which means the performance of the rig will be less. So we want to try to get to a point where we have no counterweight. So now that we know that we have enough clearance, I'm going to disconnect these cables again so we can finish our balance. So I'm going to pull these off. And we're going to finish balancing our rig. So we know our front to rear is now balanced. So now I'm going to balance the roll. So we're going to unlock that and unlock this and check our roll center. Now it seems that I am already pretty close on our roll. The roll axis is quite centered. If you need to adjust, it's unlocking this and sliding it right or left. So right now we're off. We can go back to balanced. We're a little bit front heavy right now, so we'll move that back. So we can look now that we're just a little off on roll. So that's pretty centered. So now the next thing would be our pan. So we're going to turn the camera sideways here. I'm going to unlock the pan motor. And to adjust pan balance, we're going to align it so that everything is vertical. So we're going to lift up the ring, and we're going to tilt this right and tilt it left. And we're going to watch which way this moves. So if you're way out of balance, and we can do that and show here. So if we're way out of balance, the camera's going to swing right or left when we move, right? See how it swings? So we're going to make a small adjustment, and then we'll do the same thing again and look at which way it swings. So we'll move it back. Now, this pan balance is really important. The pan motor is probably the motor that gets the hardest workout when you're using the gimbal, because it's trying to counteract a lot of your hand movements. So getting the pan motor well balanced is very important. So as you can see now, I'm pretty well balanced. So when I tilt the ring, it doesn't swing right to left. So again, upright and tilt right and left. There's no swing. That means that the pan motor is balanced. So now all three axes are balanced. So we're pretty much good to go for that. So we're going to add the rest of our accessories and then cable up. So for our monitor, for this one, we're going to use a cold shoe, small rig cold shoe mount. Put this on the top, and then using those small little holes in the ring, we're going to put our Allen key in and just tighten it up. And then we're going to be using for our monitor our Small HD Cine 7 with Red control and Bolt 500. So this is an all-in-one monitor that gives us both transmitter and camera control as well as onboard monitoring. So same thing with the little holes. We're going to tighten that up. Make sure our monitor's on there nice and safe. And we can tighten these little screws on the side as well. Make sure that the monitor isn't flopping around. All right. And then we're going to add our V-mount battery on the top of the ring. So we're going to be using the V-mount to power our accessories. Now the cool thing about the Tilt-A-Ring is the V-mount is also transmitting power through the ring and can power our gimbal. So you could run everything off the V-mount as well as your accessories, and then have your handle battery as a backup. So now we're going to start to cable up. So as we did before, we're going to put our power cable on, and we're going to route this up and over the camera. Same thing with our SDI cable. We're going to route this around and up and over. Now, keeping in mind that as we route cables, we want to make sure that we're routing stuff in ways that give us enough slack in the system that as the camera rotates, we don't drag or pull cables in weird directions. So what we're going to do here is we're going to wrap this around twice. So this allows me, by putting a bongo tie on here, allows me to keep our cables pretty clean and tidy. And we want to make sure that we're out of the way of our pan bar. So again, we're now back heavy because I added the cables. So we're going to tilt forward a little bit and check our balance. And move our cable out of the way. So now we have clearance. So I'm going to take this cable and I'm going to make a nice big loop with it. I'm going to lock our tilt again. So I'm going to make a nice big loop, and I'm going to come around and plug this into the battery. So again, having this nice loop allows me to have enough play in the system so that this doesn't bind when the camera's panning. So I'm going to check that by unlocking the pan and rotating the camera and making sure that the cables are not binding up. So we'll lock that again. We're going to take another bongo tie here, and we're going to tie this up all in the ring. Having your cables neat and tidy really keeps from having any snags, getting cables pulled or ripped off. So keeping it all nice and tidy is a good thing. So we're going to plug in our power for our monitor. And same thing again, we're going to loop this around, tie this up into a couple loops with the Velcro that's on the cable. And then we're going to plug this into the battery right here. All right. So now that we're all plugged in, we've got everything wired up, we can go ahead and power up our gimbal since we've already balanced. Now the RS3 will automatically unlock itself. So everything's going to come into position. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to come around to the back here and we want to set our auto calibrate. So we're going to go and set start calibration. we're going to want to put it on a flat surface and not touch it. So we're going to let the system calibrate for the new weight that we put on it, because most likely there was a lighter camera on here before. So we'll let it calibrate. All right, now that our calibration is done, we can come around and check our movement, make sure that the camera is nice and balanced, which it is. And then we can power up our camera, power up our monitor. And there you go. So that is a Red DSCM2 with a full cinema lens, follow focus motor, matte box and filter, monitor, all in a tilt-a-ring on a Ronin RS3. So the basic concepts we did here by making sure that we're balanced both with our front to rear and then our up and down on our tilt cage, our roll and our pan gets us into a position where we can run heavier cameras, heavier payloads, and still have plenty of room for the cage to move. So that's how you can set that up. Next, we'll show you how to do it with the dual handle grip. All right, so now that we've shown you how to set up the RS3 and put it and use it in the tilt-a-ring, we're now going to show you how to set it up in a more traditional mode with the single handle and the dual handle grips from DJI. So we're going to move this aside here, and we're going to take the accessories off. So first we're going to remove the monitor. And we're going to take off our V-mount battery, because we're going to need that. And then undo all of our cables so that they're free. We're going to bring over our handle with the stand already mounted and with everything locked and the motors disabled and in lock position. We're going to take this off and we'll transition it over into the single handle. So now we have a much more traditional build of our RS3 on this handle, but this would be really hard to operate. It'd be a lot of weight, could really hurt the wrist. So DJI has made the dual handle grips. So these can be put on either side of the Ronin, like this. And you'll note that we've put a V-mount plate on one side, and that's so that we can now power all of our accessories from our DTAP source, and we can have that on either side. So we've got our cables here. So we're going to start to add our accessories. So let's put on our V-mount battery there. And then what I like to do is put one of these little small rig bar arms on the handles here. So we like to take one of these little small rig dual bar arms with 1/4 mounts, and I like to put this on. For me, I like it on my left side. It can be left or right side. It can be mounted either way. But I like having this over here, so then we can mount the monitor down below near my hands, so I can operate looking just at the monitor. Now we have to remember that whatever we put up here has to be able to clear the Ronin as it swings around. So we can't have the monitor too high or too close to the back of the pan arm. So I'm going to lock this up, and then I'm going to take the monitor, and with this one, because we have transmission antennas, we're going to mount this monitor upside down on this side, and we'll just flip the picture. So some monitors have screw points on the top, so that you don't have to flip it upside down. But the benefit of upside down as well is now my cables are nice and tidy up tucked in here, not being looped around the bottom where they can get snagged. And that also means shorter cable runs. So we're going to take our SDI cable and we're going to connect this to the monitor here. And then you'll note that I have the battery on the opposite side of the monitor, and that's to keep the weight balanced, because if all my weight's on one side, that's going to really overwork one of my arms, and when I'm trying to run around with this thing, I can get tired much easier. So having the weight balanced by monitor on one side, battery on the other, helps increase my run times, my shoot times, and less strain on my arms. So we're going to take our monitor power, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to run this power cable across, and then with this little Velcro tie that we have on here, we're going to tie these cables up. So again, in the same idea or concept with the ring is keeping our cables all nice and neat and tidy so that we're not snagging stuff as we move and operate. So you can see we've got our cable runs here real nice and tidy. We've got everything coming down from the top here from our camera. We've got our power running over here and our monitor. So that's pretty much it. It's all set up. We can now power everything up. So we'll power up the gimbal. Everything will unlock. And now we have a dual handle set up with a full-size Red. So you can also move the monitor out of the way, a little bit further off to the side here. and we could operate from the center handle so that we could still pull focus with that knob if we wanted to run the DJI focus motor. So as we can see, I still have clearance from my arms. I can still move and stabilize. So you have a bunch of different options on how we can configure this rig, even with a heavier payload. Another thing we like to do sometimes is put these on a monopod. So you can rest it on the ground, but then you can hold it with two hands, get up higher, get down lower. So a lot of different configuration options, different payloads. And you can see we can run pretty much a full-size Red, full-size cinema lens, single filter, and a focus motor, all pretty easily on the Ronin RS3. So of course this is all available for rental here at DeHaven Camera. You can reach us on the line at DeHavenCamera.com or send us an inquiry at rentals@DeHavenCamera.com or catch us on our ShareGrid page.